I feel good, because I know Catcher Freeman somewhere. The Catcher Freeman somewhere. You know Catcher Freeman, who sits on high and looks down low. Man cannot make it like this. They can take the picture, but they can't make it. Only the greatest black man who ever lived, that you have known high, can make it for you.
Catcher Freeman was the greatest black man who ever lived.
Joy, don't be ashamed to call.
Catcher Freeman was a sexy man.
Yes, look.
Only Catcher Freeman can give that woman the kind of joy she had right there. Make a joyful noise unto the greatest black man who ever lived.
I am very happy to be here.
Man, yes, sir. Can I get an amen? I don't know what you come to do, but I'm the praise.
Malcolm X, Nat Turner, and Barack Obama all rolled into one.
Lord.
You're Catcher Freeman? The Catcher Freeman?
You've heard of him.
Of course I've heard of you. Who has not heard of Catcher Freeman?
Oh, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? Catcher Freeman here on Debate the Cause with a little bit of politics. Yeah, we've got the live Home Affairs Committee questioning Suella Braverman on asylum policies at the moment. Then it's going into PMQs. Now, this PMQs, unfortunately, that's the first one I'm doing on YouTube, 66, I think. But this PMQs is going to be the B team, right? So it's going to be Dominic Raab versus what's the name? One with the red hair and the flicks. I forgot her name now. You know, the Northerner. I'll remember in a second.
People are coming here through several countries because there's a massive pull. They're picked up in the sea. They're driven to Manston, they're processed, and then put in hotels, and then dispersed. Until we remove the pull factor, it's never going to stop, and all these dodgy groups are going to keep making millions and millions of pounds at the expense of the taxpayer. And just last week in the Midland Hotel in Mansfield, which looks after homeless people from Mansfield and Ashfield residents, my residents, were turfed out, and illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, were placed in the hotel. What do I say to the people in Ashfield who say to me, this is absolutely ridiculous? We've got hard-working, tax-paying people in Ashfield paying their rates, paying their taxes, helping to look after our own homeless people and put them in local hotels. Now they've been turfed out to put people in who, quite frankly, have been trafficked. They've got no right to be here, and some of them are criminals. Whoa. Please tell me what I say to them.
Well, I agree that we are in a crisis, and you know, I don't think it's fair to try and minimise the challenge that we are facing, or to suggest that it's easy to fix. The reality is that this is a really complex challenge, and you're absolutely right. You describe it in the right way. This is largely criminal gangs exploiting vulnerable people, selling a lie.
Remember, this is the Suella Braverman who quit during Liz Truss's government, or actually resigned because she broke ministerial code, like some might say intentionally. And then she admitted that she broke it 6 times and then was re-employed by Rishi Sunak when he came to power. So really and truly, she shouldn't really be here. But, you know, it's that Tory brass neck of we do what we like and we employ who we like, and you don't have any say in it. So now we have to listen to this second generation Kenyan Asian who's implementing stringent immigration policies against people that look like her. Just saying.
Talked a bit about that. We also need to change some of our legal frameworks, frankly, because people are coming here and making spurious claims of modern slavery or asylum, and they are gaining and buying time in the UK at the cost of the British taxpayer. So we need to change some of our legal frameworks.
Come back on the spurious claims, Home Secretary, because I know they're making spurious claims, and you know, and most people in the real world know they're making spurious claims. What can we do? Because an immigration law is never going to admit it. A claimant's never going to admit it. So how do we solve that problem?
Well, we did announce earlier that we are going to introduce legislative measures. I can't go into the detail of what that legislation is going to include because discussions are still live within government. But there is a need to make the rules more robust and the regime tighter. And whether that's, you know, effectively, we want to send the message that if you are coming here illegally, you will not be able to stay here indefinitely in some cases, or for a very long period of time while your asylum claim is being processed. And there is you're not allowed to jump the queue. You're not allowed to play the rules. So that's the regime we need to set up. The Nationality and Borders Act has made some progress in getting to that point, and some of it is due to be operationalised, and the age assessments are one part of that puzzle. So the legal changes will be part of our solution. We also need to work with the prevention and the detection further upstream, and Dan's work with the National Crime Agency. You talked a lot about the criminal element of it. There's been some success between the French authorities and the UK authorities in actually intercepting some of these gangs, arresting hundreds of the individuals who are facilitating the criminal activity, and actually resulting in the disbanding of some of these gangs. So that's part of the problem. That won't fix it completely.
One more question, Secretary.
But it's part of the problem, part of the solution.
Short of time. I'm being told that hotels all over the country are being offered twice as much money to accept asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, as they are to house homeless people or just normal tourists. Is that true?
So I don't know the specific terms contained in the contracts relating to particular hotels. What I do know, however, is that there has been a paucity of supply of hotels which have been available for this particular
use. We were told, Home Secretary, during COVID that the reason that immigrants were in hotels was to stem the flow of the virus, to control the virus. The virus is gone now, but we're putting more in hotels.
I don't know about that, man. I went out yesterday.
Putting more in hotels because we cannot procure enough private rented accommodation via local authorities.
Can I just put it to you, Home Secretary, we're putting more in hotels because the Home Office has failed to control our borders, and it's not fit for purpose at the moment.
Yeah.
Well,
I went out yesterday. I heard people with the cough, that bubble cough. I had like 3 people with the bubble cough yesterday. So I'd start taking my vitamin C's and D's and that. Man.
This year. And we're just conscious there's only a few days left until the end of this year. So is that still going to happen? Are we going to see some legislation introduced?
Well, I can't commit to a timeline today, I have to say, but legislation will be introduced.
Okay. You did say later this year. So
right. Well,
that's not going to happen.
I can't go into too much detail, but there's been lots of changes in government. There's been, we are working at pace to introduce the legislation. Ideally it would be by the end of this year, I have to say.
Okay, thank you. James Daly.
Thank you very much, Chair. Why
half an hour to PMQs
make 15 cases a week, decide 15 cases a week?
Well, that's a very good question, and one that I myself have posed. What we have found is that there's often the applications are incredibly voluminous with their paperwork and the kind of substance that's put into those claims, and sometimes they involve very complex issues, quite personal matters, issues relating to vulnerable people, and what I've been told is it is very difficult to make decisions at that kind of level.
Well, I think that anybody looking at this situation, and perhaps Mr. Rycroft can tell me if I'm wrong, the fact that we've got to a situation where only one decision per week was being made is the height of rank incompetence or bad management. And I think it goes to Mr. Anderson's point that the most basic tasks are not being carried out in anywhere near an efficient manner. So, Mr. Radcliffe, can you just tell us what this lack of productivity and the grand gesture that we need to get to 3 decisions a week? I mean, that is a scandal. 3 decisions a week in any other industry, that would be laughable. So, could you please give me some reassurance we're going to get into more than that?
So what I can do, Mr. Daly, is to set out the differences between a decision in relation to someone's asylum claim and other decisions that other Home Office teams are making day in, day out, which are much more at the volume that you're talking about, in fact, much higher than that. So if you take another example, the EU settlement scheme, for instance, which very successfully provided decisions on status for, I think, over 6 million EU nationals, decision makers in that team on that scheme were taking, I think, more than 15 decisions per day. Not even per week. That's because it was compared to this, a very simple yes or no decision. But whereas someone's asylum claim, as the Home Secretary said, it often comes with a very significant set of paperwork, which depends crucially on not just the circumstances in the country to which they come from, but also their very particular claims for persecution or whatever it is. I'm not denying that one decision per caseworker per week is too low. It is much too low. But it would be unreasonable also to think you could get to 15 a day in that world.
If I was looking, if you were to show me, I'm assuming I don't know, it's paper files, electronic files, but a file that a decision maker has made, whether it is to grant or not, what would I see within that file? How many pieces of paper would I see?
Well, there'd be a lot, and it's not just when we talk about the decision. We're also talking about the things that go into the decision, including the interview, which takes up many hours. So
let's go into this. We've got the interview. What else have we got that's part of the process?
You've got all of the background about the country and the person's claim for asylum, all of their particular family and identity documentation and so on.
So we were only making 3 decisions a week. 3 decisions a week. That's what the Home Office was. That's the rate the Home Office were going through those asylum applications. 3 decisions a week.
Yes, it will.
We're going to be back here having exactly the same conversation, because there is no desire, as far as I can see, on the evidence from the Home Office to put in place a process which is rigorous, demanding, and takes into account the circumstances. From what I understand, Mr. Rycroft, what you're saying, the person comes in, provides some documents, an interview is taken place, perhaps there's a phone call. That does not take hours and hours and hours of work to do. It just doesn't, does it?
I share your ambition to increase the productivity of this set of caseworkers. We have got a very significant programme of work in place, including starting off with the pilot in Leeds that the Home Secretary has already mentioned, and rolling that out to other decision-making hubs across the UK, so that eventually through next year we do get to those sorts of levels, which will be high enough to clear the backlog and to deal with the incoming flow. And we are absolutely determined to do that. I just want to point out the difference in complexity of an individual's life. To pick another.
Don't this guy look like Ben Affleck on the right? Ben Affleck without a beard.
Is also a scheme which requires essentially very slow decision making, because that is about the whole life of someone, and so the decisions per caseworker per week on that scheme are even lower than they would be on asylum, because the complexity is even greater.
Because of time, unfortunately, I'd like to ask a lot more questions, but obviously we're here elected representatives of the people. We're not here just having an intellectual discussion between ourselves in this room. And many of my constituents, many of the people I meet around the country, if they understand that people are coming here illegally, they want to know why those people cannot be sent straight back to Albania immediately. Could you please give them an answer to that question?
Yeah. Because they will put in a legal claim, whether it's for asylum or whether it's for modern slavery. And once they put in a claim, that triggers duties on the part of the UK state to consider those claims. And they are allowed to stay in this country while those claims are being processed and considered.
So in terms of, if that is the issue, then are we, as we are both members of the same party, are we looking at legislation to address that problem, to make sure that we have the legal power and right to deport illegal immigrants immediately?
Well, I can't go into the detail of the legislative measures that we're looking at, but we do want to make it easier to remove people from the UK, and we want to try and avoid this problem that we are facing right now, which is that people are able to stay here while their claim is pending. That is what is so important about the Rwanda scheme, because once Rwanda is operationalised, it will mean that we will be able to remove people and their claim for asylum will be considered abroad, and that will enable a swifter turnaround.
The other thing you could say to your constituents, Mrs. Daly, is that this is not just a UK issue. We've been focusing here about the UK aspects of it on our system and how to improve that. But other countries are going through similar things. Twice as many people claim asylum each year in France as in the UK. 3 or 4 times as many as the UK in Germany. So we're talking about a global challenge here, which requires global solutions.
Everything is a global challenge that requires global solutions.
People referred into the modern slavery, into the mechanism.
Any time
it's taking
Tories
about
are cornered.
450 days. for that to be decided. Why can't those claims be
seems to be
decided
the
in
response.
28 days?
Well, there's a legal requirement that that it takes a minimum period of time, and 28 days is outside of our legal minimum.
What's the legal minimum?
Legal minimum is now 40. Did we move it to 45 days? Yes.
45, I think, but we're subject to confirmation.
The legal minimum. Sorry, Home Secretary, I need to make this point.
Whoa.
Yeah, why can't we do it within 45 days with proper management, proper people in place, and a proper system to address within 45 days these claims and get people who, if the claims are successful, fine, within 45 days, and have a process by where people who fail can be removed from this country?
Well, it used to take around that amount of time because the numbers claiming were far lower than they are today. And frankly, the national referral mechanism, which is the process through which they go, has been overwhelmed. And now we have, far many. There were 2,500 NRM referrals for Albanian nationals in the whole of 2021, and that is a far greater number than we've seen in years prior to that. That high number of cases in our NRM has made it a lot more of a slower process.
Can I ask one question about
very
rape
quickly, and then
sexual...
I'm going to bring in Tim.
Another scandal in this country, in my view.
Oh, well, it's finished. What are you talking about? It's not finished. How is it finished?
ParliamentLive.tv.
Oh, wow. Looks like they just ended the broadcast on that one, man. He was about to go into another scandal. What? You can't do that. What the hell is that? What's that there?
ParliamentLive.tv.
Wow. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to see what's going on.
I feel good because I know Catcher Freeman somewhere. The Catcher Freeman somewhere. You know Catcher Freeman, who sits on high and looks down low. Man cannot make it like this. They can take the picture, but they can't make it. Only the greatest black man who ever lived. That you have it on high can make it for you.
Catcher Freeman was the greatest black man who ever lived.
Joy, don't be ashamed to call
Catcher Freeman was a sexy man.
Only Catcher Freeman can give that woman a
in recent months, but that proportion and volume needs to increase.
I have to go to another link.
We have been putting a lot of effort into trying to fix this problem. Operation Soteria is something which I think is innovative. It's about the closer working between the CPS and the police. So because what we're finding is that the police will either...
Can I just stop you there? I think the question was what you were going to do. We're very familiar with this whole area. We've produced a report which I hope you might have had an opportunity to look at. So we're very familiar with this, but I think the specific question was what you were going to do.
Yeah. So Operation Soteria, rollout of Operation Soteria, which I have a lot of confidence in, which is about the operational relationship between the police and the CPS, better scrutiny of the decisions that both our agencies are making, and ensuring that there is more support for victims and a swifter and a greater referral rate from police to CPS, and then ideally an increased charge rate. We are working to support victims. Ultimately, if the victim drops out of the process before charge or before referral, then a police... I
think someone on that other broadcast team got a little bit scared there. Another scandal. It's like, no, cut. Oh, I had to go to a Sky one. Wow, do you see how some news broadcasts will just click it off?
And progress there.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. It's just that there are some other issues that we haven't been able to address this morning, and I do want to give Tim and Simon an opportunity to raise them. So
20 minutes to
PMQs. It might be that you have to write with the responses, but over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. There are an awful lot of other things we haven't been able to cover today, so perhaps we can see you again before Christmas, Home Secretary, for round two, because I think there's a lot of questions I want to ask. I want to ask about the very disruptive demonstrations, another issue which has been clogging up all of our email boxes. So another bit of role play. I have formed a new group called Just Stop Oil. And together with other members of the committee, we are gluing ourselves to the highway outside the driveway of the organiser of Just Stop Oil. What will happen to me?
Well, if you are... in an ideal world, I have to just say...
No, not in an ideal world. What will happen to me now? I am glued to the pavement.
Well, the police will attend, and the police have been investing huge amounts of police time, effort and resource into policing protests to the tune of tens of millions of pounds, thousands of police hours. So they will attend, and they will attend as swiftly as possible. They will then assess what you're doing and look at you, and they will assess whether they consider that there is a reasonable basis for an arrest, whether that's obstruction of the highway, whether that is criminal damage, whether that's any other legal offence that they can identify. And if they do so, then they will arrest you. How long should
that take?
Listen, it varies depending on the circumstances. When we saw the people hanging from the gantries, that was taking hours.
Okay, I'm
because it's very hard to remove people
How long
from
should
gantries.
it take?
I'm not a frontline professional. I don't want to
put
time
on it.
Why is it?
You understand
this stuff. She's trying to say so.
Complete frustration of our constituents, unable to go about their daily business through no fault of their own, and why the public are taking the law into their own hands and removing some of these people, with the police standing by telling them not to, and in some cases arresting members of the public.
No.
Under Section 137 of the Highways Act, it is an offence if a person without lawful authority or excuse in any way wilfully obstructs the free passage along a highway. Under Section 11 of the Public Order Act 1986, against protests, if a protest is to intimidate others and compel them not to do something that they have the right to do, or not do something that they have the right not to so do. Those are two very clear existing parts of the law that should make it very easy for an attending police officer very swiftly to remove people who are obstructing the highway and intimidating people trying to go about their lawful business. Why are the police taking ages to intervene and people's lives are being disrupted?
He's making the point that the laws already exist on the books to remove people.
There is guidance which has been issued by the College of... So I've taken a real interest in the problem that you're highlighting. And I do have some
Black Lives Matter.
On the whole, the police have been
no black people in it.
very robust and done... acted very admirably in the circumstances, and I back them. But what I would, well, they have. When it comes to Just Stop Oil, since April of 2022, they've arrested 1,700 people. They've arrested on the M25 protests in the beginning of November. They arrested 64 people. Between the first on the month of October, the Met Police alone arrested 677 people.
The
there are many examples.
How long it takes before their disruption is removed, and how many of them are actually in jail receiving a meaningful and proportionate penalty for the very substantial disruption that they've been committing. Are you happy with the College of Policing's 5-step appeal guidance, which is a simple appeal to ask the person to comply, a reasoned appeal, a personal appeal, the 4th stage is a final appeal, and then eventually action? It's a nonsense, isn't it? We know what they are doing, and they are getting the extended publicity from doing it, and then they're getting little more than a slap on the wrist, and as we've seen in the Van Gogh protesters, one of them even only a suspended sentence. It's making a mockery of the government's claim to be the party and the government of law and order, isn't it, whilst this is going on?
Well, I have looked at the College of Policing guidance on protests, and I have some questions
about it. That's what we're talking about.
And
that's the type of civil disorder.
Speaking to the College of Policing, I want to look and ensure that the police are following a robust guidance.
I'm not sure about these Stop the Oil people, actually.
In the Home Office.
Okay.
I would also say, there was a recent case of Ziegler, and we saw some of the cases relating to protests, like the Colston Statute case, which I referred as Attorney General to the Court of Appeal on this very issue. On the legal framework, there are human rights considerations.
Okay, perhaps you could
and that is the legal framework within which we are working.
If you could write to us with anything else you want to tell us. Simon, I know we've got very little time left. Do you want to just raise the issue and then we'll get it in writing from the Home Secretary?
If I may, thank you, and I beg your indulgence for just a couple of minutes. So, no role play with me, just want to talk about fraud. So it's the number one crime in the UK. 41%, I think, of all crimes are fraud or fraud related. I spent a decade working in fraud and financial crime with government, with law enforcement, with industry, trying to get them to work better together before I came here. And much to my frustration, when a constituent comes to me and says they've been defrauded out of £20,000, I still don't know what to do to help them. The PM said that there was a fraud plan forthcoming. My question to you is, when can we expect it, and can we expect it to meet the scale of the challenge that our constituents are facing at the moment?
Well, you are right that we will be publishing a new fraud strategy to address exactly the issue that you've raised. And I do think that this is a big priority for us because of the relevance that it plays in modern day crime fighting. And we need, to think about all options. I think prevention actually is far better than cure. I'm very keen to explore ways in which the telecoms companies, the software companies, the banks, law enforcement can all work better together and use technology to prevent hackers getting to your constituent, whereby she is handing over her life savings online. We shouldn't be when we get to that point, we're actually too late. So I think there's a massive prevention element that I want to lead and instigate, and that will be set out in the fraud strategy. Secondly, I also think our policing...
Can we have this in writing, because we really are running very short on time. And I just wanted to raise with you, if you would write to me as well, about... I would like to know about Linton on Ouse and why the decision to cancel that happened at a time when you were very short of accommodation to move people out of Manston. So could I have an explanation for that? Could you also set out, I think you'd already agreed to do this, the information around the exceptional circumstances around detaining people beyond 24 hours, how many people were detained up to the 5-day limit, and then how many additional people were detained beyond 5 days? That would be very helpful to have that. And could I also ask if we could see the advice that was given to members of staff at Manston, so Border Force, immigration officers and contractors, about the legal basis of Manston and what powers members of staff, Border Force, immigration officers had and could use? I think that would be very helpful as well.
They're not allowed to leave.
If I could ask for that information to be sent to the committee. Can I thank all three
of you?
Can I
just clarify? You asked me about the judicial reviews issued around Manston. I've got a clarification for you. So there are no actual judicial reviews which have been issued, i.e. in claim forms, but there are pre-action protocol letters which we have received, and there are 5 pre-action protocol letters that we have received.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I thank all three of you for attending today? The concentration has obviously been on immigration and Manston and small boat crossings, but as Tim Lawton said, there are many other issues that we remain very concerned about and will be wanting to ask questions of. We're grateful for you attending today, Home Secretary. We hope we can get a date in...
It's weird. I don't understand that. What did I do? When did I mute that mic? I don't understand. Anyway, we're watching Suella Braverman facing the Home Affairs Committee. Coming to the end of it, because top of the hour is PMQs. And it's going to be like a B-team PMQs. Yeah, we are coming to the end of it. There you go.
The proceeding has ended.
The proceeding has ended. Right, well, there you go. Suella Braverman basically being questioned by the Home Affairs Committee about what's actually going on with Manston Detention Centre down there near Dover, I believe. We've had a few, petrol bombs being thrown and stuff like that. So, yeah, shit going down. We got PMQs coming up in about 10 minutes. Catch Freeman on YouTube, on Debate the Cause Free channel. Yeah, I know, it's confusing. Don't worry, I'll be back in a minute. Yeah, let me just give you my, let me give you one of my intros. Yeah, it's, my adverts.
My brigade is nearby. We're ready to free all your friends and kinfolk, but we'll need your help.
Oh, Lord, thank you, Jesus. I got a letter saying I can join Catch a Freeman Brigade and ride out with that nigga. That's your plan? Catch a Freeman, huh? Why not just wait for Santa Claus to take you away on his sled? Nigga, you don't believe in Catch a Freeman? Of course I don't. I don't believe in the Easter Bunny either.
I'm telling you, man, Catch a Freeman is real. He go around from plantation to plantation, freeing all the slaves and shit. He like 14 feet tall, got trapezius muscles and biceps. Shit crazy. He ain't just no normal nigga. He's super nigga. He like a black-ass Batman, if you will. He can fly.
Oh, the nigga blocked the bullet with his handcuff.
Shh, you're messing up the ending.
Why do you still wear shackles?
So I'll never forget those who are still in bondage. Even though you'll be free soon, you must continue to be a soldier until the war is won.
I want you and that young man to tie that knot. I'm gonna pray for you. And I want you to hold on to God's unchanging hand.
Hell no, Catch a Freeman ain't never do no shit like that. Must have been some kind of asshole told you that story, boy.
Hey!
Now sit your black ass in the back and let old Uncle Rucker tell you the real story of Catch a Freeman. Now
Catcher had never known the pleasures of the flesh before, and he was no match for the temptations of Thelma, who in the darkness of night looked even less African than she actually was. As Catcher lay passed out after expending his manly seed.
No! Don't trick Catcher.
First of all, his name wasn't even Catcher Freeman. It was Catch Freeman. And he sure wasn't freeing niggas. He was catching. Niggas couldn't appreciate.
They raised the money.
What's good?
And will be able to open a gift on Christmas morning. The Everyone Deserves a Christmas campaign,
8 minutes
also
to
based in
PMQs.
Swansea, are desperately trying
8 minutes to
raise
PMQs. I was just flicking around there to see, flicking around to see which ones were live. Yeah, so Guardian finished early. I don't like the way it cut out there when a very important question was being asked. But we got Parliament up live now, and yeah, I believe this one's going to be a B team one. So I predict low paper waving for this one. This one's going to be Angela Rayner versus Dominic Raab.
Problems. So what I do is refer the Honourable Lady back to the answer I gave earlier, which is that this government have absolutely done everything possible to target help at the least well-off in society. That's why, in addition to the inflation-linked increases to pensions and to benefits and to the living wage, the government have also made sure that those on benefits will receive a payment of £900, pensioners getting £300, households where there are people with...
Let's do this one.
To explain technically how money will be made to those households.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his kind words, and I know that he's raised this issue on a number of occasions. I am told that there are going to be details forthcoming imminently on that particular point, and I'm sure that other colleagues who are more directly involved in this have heard the Honourable
We've got 7 minutes. Still a bit of time for you to go and make yourself a cup of tea, get some crisps, get some whatever condiments before it kicks off. I think all the leaders are off doing something else. So no Ian Blackford, no Keir Starmer, and no Rishi Sunak. I had to think there a second. Who's the Tory Prime Minister? Oh yes, Rishi Sunak, isn't it? Yeah. So 7 minutes. It's the countdown. It's a shame. The first one I'm doing on YouTube, and it's not even the proper leaders. It's the B team.
With proper connectivity, and that means electrification of the North Wales line. Will he guarantee that will take place, or if not, will he accept that's a betrayal of the interests of the people?
Right, and mind you, in the back though, I've got one other news report. Let me just check this one out quickly.
With other South Korean and US warplanes. So let's speak to retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. He's here with us. He knows a bit about aerial drills, don't you? There are the planes. Those are the bombers, are they?
Two B-1B bombers. On the right-hand side, there's the F-35s, South Koreans, and on the left wing, the ones closest to us, the F-16s, the Americans. It's worth providing a bit of context here, I think, for viewers. Korea was first annexed by Japan in 1910, and in 1945, at the end of the Second World War, the former Soviet Union, America, cut it in two. It was administered to the north by former Soviet Union, China, for the south by America and its allies, and became a bit of the front line in a Cold War. In 1950, the Soviet Union had been piling weapons into North Korea. They attacked South Korea. America stepped in to help and ensure the survival of South Korea. And at the end of that war, they agreed to stick back to the original timelines. But the US has remained committed to South Korean security ever since. But in the years since, the decades since, North Korea has become increasingly isolated, and it's spent more and more of its money on missiles and weapons, particularly trying to source nuclear weapons.
OK, so now, why do we have these drills taking place? What is the background to that in the near past, should we say? Yeah, so on Friday, North Korea launched its latest nuclear rocket ballistic missile test. Why this was important, the range of this particular missile could reach the continental United States of America, and it has the potential to carry multiple warheads as well. These missiles go a long way, and even a test missile, it went up over 3,700 miles. And it goes right here, about 620 miles, landing in the Sea of Japan over to our right. But it's also of interest that North Korea has been potentially readying itself for another nuclear test. It hasn't done.
Right, basically, America's involving itself again in territories that are nowhere near America. they've sent warships over to North Korea because North Korea have been doing a few rocket tests.
But it's very clear earlier on in the war, they were quoted as saying they were looking to help liberate Ukraine from the regime in place. So the question is now, why has it changed? For Putin, it's evident the war is not going the way he had planned at all. It's clear that Russia is having to revise its objectives. It looks most likely this claim is more for a domestic audience in Russia than it is for us, so no real change. But I certainly wouldn't expect any letting up in the campaign. Zelensky is still under a lot of pressure and a lot of danger.
And we've seen it with Kherson, which was liberated just last week, but already people there are being advised to leave. What's going on there?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk because of the blackouts, because as the winter approaches, life is becoming really difficult. Picture of some of the evacuations happening just from last night. And the Russians are doing a devastating impact across the whole of the energy infrastructure across Ukraine. And the Ukrainians are offering free opportunities for the civilians to evacuate. Part of the challenge, though, question is why focus on Kherson? Because the whole country has been hit by the same challenges. Part of that, the answer to that is that whilst the Russians have been ejected from Kherson, they are just the other side of the Dnipro River. So they are literally sitting within artillery range of Kherson. And that means they're still a major threat. It's also the Ukrainians are clearly having a go at, have they paused or are they going to continue their offensive? And if they continue their offensive, out to the north around the top of Zaporizhzhia, across potentially the Novokakhovka Dam, and also down to the Kinburn-Spit Peninsula.
Oh, by the way, I was going to say about this guy, right? Since I've been doing Sky and numerous other news reports, this analyst here has got so much stuff wrong, it's ridiculous, right? But as you can see, this natural line that you're seeing here in red was the natural line of defence that we knew Russia were pulling back to 3 months ago when they said they were doing a strategic withdrawal. We knew about that 3 months ago. So all of the reports that you hear about the stunning achievements of the Ukrainian army and counter-attacks, it's bullshit. We knew there was going to be a withdrawal, and we knew the red echelon, some of the red echelon troops were going to get it. Oh, look, by the way, the pound's up to 119 against the dollar. So stability increasing under Rishi Sunak, by the way. 2 minutes before PMQs, he's just talking about the new munitions bullshit. Let's go over to the House. 1 minute to PMQs.
Which is helping re-establish a girls' team. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that grassroots sport is vital for the health, well-being and quality of life of all our communities?
Mr. Speaker, I would absolutely agree with my right honourable friend, and that is why we have allocated £1.3 million to 17 projects in Wales to make the vital improvements to the change room facilities and the artificial grass surfaces.
This might be an 18.
Mr. Speaker, sports clubs are at the heart of every community in Wales, and Wales is at the heart of every community, of every decision taken by this government and this Prime Minister.
All right, last question, I believe.
Mr. Speaker, well, as people up and down Wales celebrate Wales's success and wish them the best for the next couple of matches, this is an ideal and unparalleled opportunity to galvanise that enthusiasm and develop the grassroots football in Wales. The Football Association of Wales tell me that £12 million has been earmarked by DCMS for the development of the sport over the next few years, but could be threatened by the cuts announced by the Chancellor last week. So will the Secretary of State please now speak to the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport and beg her to safeguard that money for the development of grassroots football in Wales?
In the blue corner, Rishi,
Mr. Speaker, this government have already shown
Lammy's on the front. We get Lammy's beanhead.
Many other sports as well through the funds that have been dispersed by DCMS across the United Kingdom. I'm sure other right honourable colleagues will have heard the comments made by the honourable lady, but I can assure her of our commitment to grassroots sports across Wales and the United Kingdom, and I look forward to joining her to support y Tîm Cymru ar Wal Goch wythnos nesaf. Diolch.
Oh, in
completes Welsh questions.
Oh, that was
Before
Welsh
we come to the Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretations of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We now come to questions to Prime Minister Jonathan Gullis.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Seconds out. Round one.
Mr. Speaker, I know that members across the House will want to join me in wishing both England and Wales the best of luck for the World Cup. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People in places like Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork aren't getting the help they need quickly enough when it comes to mental health. Fellow campaigner James Starkey and I were delighted when the Prime Minister, who was then Chancellor, said he would back our campaign every step of the way to get mental health nurses into GP surgeries. So will the Prime Minister deliver on his promise, back our No Time to Wait pilot scheme developed by the Royal College of Nursing and help get people the support they need?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for his continued campaigning on this important issue. I'm pleased to tell him all 1,250 primary care networks in England are entitled to recruit up to 2 mental health practitioners to work in surgeries. I know the BMA and NHS are looking at expanding that, and I look forward to working with him to ensure that his constituents in Stoke get the mental health support and care that they need.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to England and Wales on their start to the World Cup, and good luck for the rest of the tournament. Mr. Speaker, the World Cup doesn't belong to FIFA, and it doesn't belong to the host nation. It belongs to everyone who loves football. It's totally unacceptable that during this tournament, gay football fans are unable to acknowledge who they love, and players have been threatened with suspension if they show solidarity with those fans. Shame on FIFA.
Yeah, no rainbow-coloured armbands or anything like that allowed.
Britain faces the lowest growth of any OECD nation over the next 2 years. Why?
But you know what I say? Respect other countries' laws. That's what I say.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this country has experienced since 2010 the 3rd highest growth in the G7. This year, the fastest growth in the G7,
yeah, but it's still at the bottom.
Unemployment at a multi-decade low. We're getting on to deliver more growth, Mr. Speaker. We're delivering free ports. We're investing in apprenticeships. We're protecting R&D. And if the Labour Party is serious about actually supporting growth, maybe they should get on the phone with their union paymasters and tell them to call off the strikes.
Well, there will be strikes.
Mr. Speaker, we're
Hold on. We want to get through Prime Minister's questions, and you're not helping me.
For more already.
He's in total denial. We're bottom of the 38 OECD countries who are all in the same boat when it comes to COVID and Ukraine. And he wants a pat on the back. It's like a football manager, bottom of the league at Christmas, celebrating a away draw 3 months ago, and it won't wash. So they don't like their record, that's the problem. So let's try it
Someone's
another
been giving
way.
Keir good lines.
Why is Britain set to be the first country into recession and the last country out?
Of it.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that the Right Honourable Gentleman brought up the OECD report, because it contained actually 3 very important points. Firstly, it made the point that actually in the years following the pandemic, we're projected to have almost the highest growth amongst our peer countries. It also made the point, it was crystal clear that the challenges we face are completely international in nature. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, it supported our fiscal plan because it's credible and ensures sustainability. Now, the Right Honourable Gentleman would have known all of that if he actually read the whole report. But he's not interested in substance. He's an opportunist, Mr. Speaker.
So he's doing all right.
In 4 weeks, Mr. Speaker, in 4 weeks I've strengthened the economy. We've put more money into the NHS and schools.
Pounds up to 119.
We've delivered a deal to tackle illegal migration in the same 4 weeks.
Prime Minister, when I stand, you've got to sit down. But can I just say to you, you came to me quite rightly and said to me, we want to get through Prime Minister's questions. I'm going to give short answers. Please stick to what you have.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one party that's crashed the economy, and they're sitting there. And I noticed this, Mr. Speaker. I noticed this. He won't say why Britain is set to be the first into a recession and the last out. So I will. 12 years of Tory failure, followed by 12 weeks of Tory chaos. For a decade, they've let our economy drift aimlessly before suddenly cutting the parachute ropes and slamming it to the ground. And because of the changes he's made, a typical household will end up with tax increases of £1,400. They don't want to hear about these tax increases of £1,400. Contrast that to a super wealthy non-dom living here but holding their income overseas. How much more?
Order. Mr. Young, I don't need any more. I don't need shouting, don't need pointing. You're meant to be a good example when you sit on this front bench. Because you're on the second, don't spoil what you're meant to do.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think they want to hear this. Because of the changes... Because of the changes he's made, a typical household will end up paying tax increases of £1,400. Contrast that to a super wealthy non-dom living here but holding their income overseas. How much more has he asked them to pay?
Order. As I said to the Prime Minister, I said to the Leader of the Opposition, I've got to get through this list. I need you both to help me and think of other members. Come on.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Labour had 13 years to address this issue and did nothing. Nothing. It was the Conservative government that took action and tightened the rules. But the problem with his idea is that it would end up costing Britain money. Not my words, the words of the former Labour Shadow Chancellor. But rather than peddling fairy tales and gesture politics, let's actually tell him what we're doing to deliver for this country. A record increase in the national living wage, protecting millions from energy bills, protecting the pensioners' triple lock. That's what we're doing for this country.
Mr. Speaker, if they'd grown the economy at the same rate as the last Labour government, we'd have tens of billions of pounds more to spend on that. And Mr. Speaker, it wasn't a trick question. The answer is he's not asked non-doms to pay a penny more. Every year, he talks about the money. Every year, that's £3.6 billion thrown away because he won't make them pay their taxes here. How many extra doctors could Britain afford with that money?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that he brought up doctors, because last week we delivered record increases in funding for the NHS. Not just more doctors, but more nurses, more scans, more operations. That shows our commitment to prioritise the NHS. Not my words, the words of the NHS Chief Executive.
Scrapping the non-dom status would allow us to train 15,000 doctors every year. That's what Labour would do. And we can carry on handing out tax breaks to the super rich. Or we can live in a society where people don't have to go private to get a doctor's appointment. It's that simple. He also hands Shell 90p for every £1 they spend drilling. So they haven't paid a penny in windfall tax. Mr. Speaker, you may have seen this week that somebody shredded £10,000 in protest at those propping up an oil and gas giant. But he shreds £10,000 every other minute propping them up. Which does he think is the more absurd?
Mr. Speaker, this is the government that has actually put in place an economic plan that will deliver confidence and stability to our economy. And all I've heard from the Honourable Gentleman today, there's no answers, there's no substance, because there's no plan, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the NHS. We're delivering record funding for the NHS, but we can only do that on the foundations of a strong economy. You can't deliver for the NHS unless you have a plan for the economy, and he doesn't have either, Mr. Speaker.
But you ruined the economy.
Mr. Speaker, every time he opens his mouth, another powerful business voice says he hasn't got a plan on growth. The failure of the last 12 years and the chaos of the last 12 weeks are compounded by the decisions he's taking now. He won't follow Labour's plan to scrap non-dom status. Nope. Instead, we've got an NHS staffing crisis. He won't follow Labour's plan to make oil and gas giants pay their fair share. Instead, he hammers working people.
True.
And he won't push through planning reform. Instead, he kills off the dream of home ownership. Too weak to take on his party, too weak to take on vested interest. 12 long years of Tory government, 5 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors. Why do they always clobber working people?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about leadership. This summer, I stood on my principles and told the country what they needed to hear, even though it was difficult. When he ran for leader, he told his party what they wanted to hear. And even now, he says one thing and he does the other. He says he cares for working people, but he won't stand up to the unions. He said he'd honour Brexit, but he tried to have a second referendum. And now he tries to talk tough about immigration, but he promised to defend free movement. You can trust him. You can trust him to deliver for his party. You can trust me to deliver for the country.
They're calling for more. It's like a big fight. It's like a rally fight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we debate how to best help our constituents with their energy costs, 10 million people in Ukraine are without power due to Russia's barbaric strikes on the country's energy infrastructure. So can my right honourable friend set out what support we will be providing to our Ukrainian allies to help them repair the damage and keep their citizens warm this winter?
I'm pleased to tell my honourable friend that I spent time discussing this with President Zelensky at the weekend and talking to Ukrainian families about the impact these awful strikes are having on them. I know the whole House will be proud to know that we're providing millions of pounds of immediate support with generators, shelter and water repairs on top of the 570 mobile power generation that we are donating to power facilities across Ukraine. We're also working with the government to repair critical infrastructure with 8 projects identified by UK Export Finance to be delivered in the near future.
We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in welcoming the moderator of the Church of Scotland to our proceedings this afternoon and to thank him for his sermon at St Margaret's this morning. Mr. Speaker, this morning the Supreme Court clarified a point of law, but the very point of democracy in this union is now at stake, and democracy will not be denied. Because whether Westminster likes it or not, last year the people of Scotland voted for a Scottish Parliament with a majority and the mandate to deliver an independence referendum. The Prime Minister has every right to oppose independence. He has no right to deny democracy to the people of Scotland. If the Prime Minister keeps blocking that referendum, will he at least be honest and confirm that the very idea that the United Kingdom is a voluntary union of nations is now dead and buried?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying we respect the clear and definitive ruling of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. And what I would say to the honourable gentleman, that, firstly, I am looking forward to also seeing the moderator of Scotland tomorrow. And I think that the people of Scotland want us to be working on fixing the major challenges that we collectively face, whether that's the economy, supporting the NHS, or indeed supporting Ukraine. Now is the time for politicians to work together, and that's what this government will do.
Ian Blackton.
Mr. Speaker, it is right that we respect the decision of the court. But the Prime Minister can't claim to respect the rule of law and then deny democracy in the very same breath. If democracy is to matter, if elections matter, then mandates matter. Since 2014, the Scottish National Party has won 8 elections in a row. Last year, we won a landslide. The Scottish Parliament now has the biggest majority for an independence referendum in the history of devolution.
The first referendum was
doesn't even have a personal mandate to sit in 10 Downing Street. What right does a man with no mandate have to deny Scottish democracy?
Exactly. Good question.
But, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Scottish democracy, I'm pleased that the Scottish government has one of the most powerful devolved assemblies anywhere in the world.
I mean,
and I'm pleased.
The party has a mandate.
And I was pleased, very shortly after becoming Prime Minister, to be the first Prime Minister in over a decade to attend the Council, to sit down with the First Minister, to explore ways in which we can work together with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland. Whether that's delivering our growth deals, delivering free ports, or ensuring that the £1.5 billion of extra Barnet money can go towards supporting public services, that's what we're committed to doing in Scotland.
Gareth Johnson. Mr. Speaker, last month, Just Stop Oil clambered up the Dartford crossing, causing chaos for days. They then attacked artworks, the M25, and anything else to cause misery and mayhem.
Just Stop Oil.
These people are not protesters, they are criminals. Will the Prime Minister therefore consider making Just Stop Oil a prescribed organisation so that they can be treated as the criminal organisation they actually are?
Oh boy.
Mr. Speaker, the kind of demonstrations we've seen recently disrupt people's daily lives, they cause mass misery for the public, and they put people in danger. The police have our full support in their efforts to minimise this disruption and tackle reckless and illegal activity. The Public Order Bill will give them the powers they need, and I look forward to seeing the support that that bill receives from every part of this House.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, one of my constituents, Vanessa, has contacted me in floods of tears. Her mortgage payments have risen by £500 a month. She and her husband were already struggling with high energy bills and high food bills. Now, like 1 in 4 across the country, they fear losing their home. We are out of options and heartbroken, says Vanessa. So will the Prime Minister introduce a new mortgage protection fund paid for by reversing his tax cuts to the banks? Will he help Vanessa keep her home?
Mr. Speaker, I'm deeply sorry to hear about Vanessa's circumstances, and I want her to know that the plan that the Chancellor announced last week will help.
You're just getting to the end of the fire part of PMQs. They're going to be fighting questions out to the Tory backbenchers now. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that my constituency is absolutely wonderful, and that, as most of the wonderful constituencies in the UK, we should laud our efforts to be as wonderful as we actually? Yes, I agree that you are actually wonderful, and it's just going to be enough. I mean that we're getting to that part now. But Rishi Sunak's given a good account of himself as Tory leader. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's without a mandate, without a vote, and he's probably spewing number bollocks. But he's got them. He's got them behind him. Do you know what I mean? And he's sounding very prime ministerial. He is. I mean, he's not gonna win in the next election. Let's face it. But he's sounding prime ministerial. I can't lie.
Join me in reminding people that it's the perfect opportunity to go out and support their local non-league football teams, who are incredibly welcoming, and including in that, of course, Atherstone Town Community Football Club, Bedworth United and Coleshill Town in my constituency.
Well, I'm happy to join my honourable friend in praising all his local teams, and he makes an excellent point, actually, that volunteers have a vital role to play in community sport and actually the delivery of major events, and I join him in thanking them for everything that they do. Sport accounts for over half, Mr. Speaker, of volunteering in the UK, and every one volunteer generates a capacity for at least 8 more people to participate in sport, and I know the whole House will join me in praising their efforts.
Alan Dorrance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon. Mr. Speaker, since 2014, the SNP have won 8 elections, and we now have more councillors, members of the Scottish Parliament, and more MPs in this place than any other Scottish political party. Every one of those elected members were elected on a manifesto and clear mandate for Scottish independence. Mr Speaker, what democratic right does this government have to deny Scottish democracy, refuse an independence referendum, and to keep us shackled and imprisoned in this involuntary and unequal union against the will of the Scottish people?
Shackled and imprisoned?
Well, Mr Speaker, again, we respect the decision of the court today with regard to the referendum, and we're getting on with the business of working constructively, collaboratively, in partnership with the Scottish Government to deliver for his constituents. Indeed, the Ayrshire Growth Deal is investing over £100 million to make use of his region's strong industrial heritage, potentially making more use of renewable energy. That's the kind of positive project we should be focused on, and that's what we'll keep on delivering.
John Penrose.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has rightly promised to recruit a successor to Lord Geit as his ethics adviser promptly. But would he accept that threats to integrity are often broader than the job description of the Prime Minister's adviser on the Ministerial Code? And will he therefore commit to introduce the additional measures in the new 5-point integrity plan on topics like lobbying and conflicts of interest, developed with organisations like Transparency International and Spotlight on Corruption, to show he will walk the talk and put party integrity and government integrity at the heart of our democracy?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his comprehensive and thoughtful suggestions. As he acknowledged, he knows that I've committed to appointing an independent adviser on ministerial interests, and I very much look forward to studying his other proposals in proper time.
Chris Law.
Mr Speaker, just 3 months ago, this appointed interim Prime Minister said in Scotland, and I quote, "We live in a union, which is of course there by consent and by democracy." And added, "I accept that." Well, Mr Speaker, by their consent and by democracy, the Scottish people have already voted by a clear majority in the Scottish Parliament to have their say through a referendum on the independent future for Scotland. So it begs the ultimate question, Mr Speaker. Can this Prime Minister tell us if he accepts Scottish democracy? And if so, how that's compatible with today's Supreme Court ruling that clearly exposes the myth that the UK is a voluntary union and is upheld by consent?
Mr Speaker, at a time like this, the Scottish people want to see their governments working together on the things that matter to them, and I believe that that is possible.
So if you ask me, remember, since I've been doing this, I've always mirrored the Scottish independence thing with the Donald Trump thing. I said they're both very similar incidents. The majority of Scottish people wanted independence. They went for a referendum, and then it came out like, "Oh, you want to be part of the UK?" Like, what? And everyone was scratching their heads going, "What?" Very, very similar with the Biden election. If you ask me, a load of Trump fans running around scratching their head going, what the hell? So this is why you're expecting, this is why you're hearing about red wave. This is why you're hearing about potential landslide for Trump in the next election, because people are going to make their protest vote known. And that's in a very similar circumstance. The Scottish people are making their outrage known through numerous different votes. So all you're going to hear about is Scottish independence, because I believe that referendum was rigged, and I believe all of the people that voted are going to now want to manifest that intention in another way, and they're not going to muck about. However it comes, they're going to display their willingness to be independent from the UK.
£5 million to support them, and like him, I'm keen to see progress as soon as possible.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. During the 2014 referendum, we were told that Scotland was an equal partner in a family of nations. Yet the disaster that is Brexit was forced on Scotland against our will, and we see devolution wound back by legislation such as the Internal Market Act. So if the Prime Minister still claims the UK is a voluntary union, can he explain the democratic route by which the people of Scotland get to make a choice over their own future?
See? Well, Mr Speaker, the UK is a collaborative and constructive union that is delivering for the people of Scotland. Even in Ayrshire itself, where we're working collaboratively with the Scottish Government to invest in aerospace, advanced manufacturing and space. Those are the types of activities that will bring tangible benefit to the people in her region, and that's the right focus for the Government.
Angela Adams.
Can answer the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As a North Yorkshire MP, my right honourable
friend will know how crucial bus services are to our communities. Last month, Arriva stopped the only bus between Selby and Doncaster, meaning that 40 Selby College students had to find, at very short notice, alternative transport to get to college. Thankfully, the college itself stepped in to resolve the situation. Additionally, across North Yorkshire, around 80 other bus services are now under threat. Can he advise what action he will take to ensure that essential services are not withdrawn at short notice and ensure that these are continued to be operated across Selby District and wider North Yorkshire?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right, and he knows that I share exactly the same challenges that he faces in our rural areas of making sure that our constituents have access to the bus services they need. I'm pleased that the Chancellor's allocated funding for extra bus services across the country, and I look forward to working with him to ensure that that money finds its way to rural areas like North Yorkshire to provide the connectivity that's so important for people to have opportunity and get access to public services.
Olivia Blake.
May I refer the House to my register of interests? Mr. Speaker, tomorrow marks 1 year since 32 people lost their lives in the Channel. New evidence suggests that the boat reached British waters and that the French and British authorities knew that it was in distress for a very long time. Families are still waiting for answers from the Marine Accident Investigation. Why has this investigation taken so long? Will he commit to a full public inquiry afterwards? And does he concede that this would not have happened if there were safe and legal routes into the UK?
Well, Mr. Speaker, every life that is lost in the Channel is a tragedy, but that is why it is so vital that we break the cycle of criminal gangs that are exploiting people and trafficking them, and that's what the Home Secretary is focused on. We have accepted over 380,000 people over the past few years because this is a place where people can seek refuge and sanctuary, but we must be able to do that in a sustainable way, and that's why it's right that we tackle illegal migration.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, rising energy bills are a challenge for all of us, and constituents in Sleaford and North Hykeham are very grateful for much of the support that has been given by government. But with temperatures this week falling below freezing in Lincolnshire, those living in park homes are particularly concerned at when they will receive their support. So I ask my honourable friend the Prime Minister, can he tell me when and how people living in park homes will receive the £400 which they're entitled to?
And my honourable friend has consistently and rightly championed her rural constituents, making sure that they get access to the energy support that we're providing. It's something that the Chancellor prioritised in last week's autumn statement. I will ensure that we get the money out as quickly as possible. She should also be reassured that the cold weather payment system provides extra financial support to those vulnerable constituents when temperatures drop below a certain point.
Callaghan.
Mr. Speaker, did Scotland vote for Brexit?
No.
Did Scotland vote for austerity?
No.
Did Scotland vote for the Tories?
No.
What we did vote for, don't shout me down, don't shout me down, I've listened to all of you. What we did vote for only last year was the right to choose our own future. With that in mind, and given a previous non-answer from the Prime Minister, can the Prime Minister tell this House, tell us all in fact, how a nation can leave this so-called voluntary union?
Mr. Speaker, the challenges that we face right now are those that require cooperation between our governments, tackling the economy, supporting the NHS, and I'm pleased that last week's autumn statement means that the Scottish Government will receive £1.5 billion in extra funding to deliver for public services in Scotland, and that's what we will continue doing.
Theresa May.
They don't believe in
Mr. Speaker,
Theresa.
Scotland is a proud nation with a unique heritage. It is a valued member of our family of nations, a union of people bound through the generations by shared interests. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this morning's Supreme Court decision gives the Scottish nationalists, the SNP, the opportunity for once to put the people of Scotland first? And end its obsession with breaking us apart.
Waiting for the last bit there. And end its obsession? Its obsession?
I think... My right honourable friend put it very well, Mr. Speaker.
Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister won't answer, but it's obvious that the route to Scottish independence is now elections, and we know, Prime Minister, there's going to be many of them. Now, Mr. Speaker, inequality cost, and in France, the middle earners earn 20% more than in the UK, and low earners earn 25% more. This inequality is why the cost of energy and the cost of living hits people worse in the UK, and it's why I'm for independence, incidentally, to choose a better path. But meantime, in my constituency, there are both more off-grid fuel customers and a higher rate of fuel poverty than in Northern Ireland. So will the PM do the right thing and extend the £200 payment that's going to Northern Ireland to the off-grid customers in my geographically distinct constituency, the Hebrides, on the basis of fairness? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker,
a lot of noise from Scotland.
Last week's autumn statement announced £55 billion to support families and businesses across the United Kingdom with their energy bills. And the Chancellor paid particular attention to those that are off-grid in rural areas by doubling the support to £200 for them, and that will help many people in his constituency and across the United Kingdom.
Sarah Brickley.
Speaker, I'm sure we'll both be celebrating this weekend what we consider to be one of the best days of the year, and that is Lancashire Day. And I thank you personally for hosting the event in Parliament. So will the Prime Minister, those who represent a Yorkshire constituency, join me in welcoming our Lancastrian local leaders and businesses to Parliament's Day, and join us in supporting our proud history and bright future by levelling up what we consider to be the best county?
May I offer my best wishes to my honourable friend and indeed to you, Mr. Speaker, for Lancashire Day. And I can put local rivalry aside on this occasion to join her in thanking Lancastrians for their contribution to our country and to wish her the very best for today's event.
Kirsten Oswald.
Mr. Speaker, what we've heard from the Prime Minister today is, in essence, that no matter how Scotland votes, Westminster will decide. But democracy demands differently to that. Mr. Speaker, the late Canon Kenyon Wright said, what if that other voice we know so well says, we say no and we are the state? Well, we say yes, and we are the people. And it is the people in Scotland who have to be heard. This place can't stand in the way of democracy. And if this Prime Minister with no mandate thinks it can, is he seriously telling us that this is a voluntary union of equals?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are focused not on the SNP but on the people of Scotland. That's who we're delivering for. I'm happy to meet with the First Minister, as I continue to do, to deliver for them, whether it's in her own constituency with a growth deal, whether it's moving civil service jobs to Scotland, whether it's delivering free ports or indeed the extra funding for public services. This is a government that will deliver for the people of Scotland, and we will do it constructively and collaboratively.
I'm starting to see Senate now.
Order, order. I would now like to make a statement. On the 20th of October, the Culture, Media, Sport Committee published a special report on answers given to it by the Right Honourable Member for Mid-Bedfordshire when she was the Secretary of State for DCMS. The Honourable Member for Ochil, South and Perthshire subsequently wrote to me asking for precedence for a complaint of a breach of privilege, as was his right. I declined to do so since the bar for such a complaint is high. The House should only take action when essential in order to provide reasonable protection for the House, its members or its officers from improper obstruction. I note the committee itself, of which the honourable gentleman is a member, has said, had Miss Doris remained the Secretary of State, driving policy of selling the channel, we may have sought referral to the Privilege Committee. But as her claims have not been inhibited, the work of the committee, and she is no longer has a position of power over the future of Channel 4, we are instead publishing this report to enable the House and its members to draw its own conclusion. So I consider it appropriate to respect the committee's assessment of the situation. Correspondence on matters of privilege is private. Indeed, had to grow to great lengths to ensure that members can write to me in confidence on any matter, knowing their communication will remain private. Expect the same courtesy in my replies. The honourable member has seen fit to give a partial and biased account of my letter on Twitter, and I await his apology. I gave the honourable member notice that I would be raising this matter at this time, but I do stress it is not the way we should be doing business in this House. Honourable member for Killenpersh.
Mr. Speaker, as you've
the floor.
Mr. Speaker, as you've just explained, the Commons Culture Committee, in which I sit, published a unanimous cross-party report about the testimony of the Right Honourable Member and the testimony she gave to the committee, and there are now considerable public interest in what should happen next. I want to put on record, Mr. Speaker, that I deplore social media pylons against you or indeed anyone else. I've been on the receiving end of them, and they are exceedingly unpleasant. But could I ask for guidance on what I and other members should tell their constituents about integrity in politics in this context? If someone misleads a committee, what should happen next?
Can I just say, integrity is that, first of all, Clinton's letter, but only half the letter, is not integrity. In fact, far from it. It misled the people of this country. It certainly put me in bad light with the people of this country, and I don't expect that to happen in an impartial speaker. So if that was an apology, I don't think it was very good. David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, in following on from that, honourable members of this House have certain strict duties on them.
We're done through PMQs.
First, there is a duty of upholding the institutions of this House.
Right, so
clearly, in breaching the confidentiality of the Speaker's private correspondence.
A PMQ is characterised there by Scottish rebellion. Pretty much all the Scots standing up and saying what I've been saying for the latest Scottish referendum smelt a bit funny. And it would turn out that it's now starting to happen where communications between MPs, even the Speaker of the House now, are getting published on Twitter. Right? So they're like, standards, man. I can't say something to you without it ended up on Twitter.
Of which he is a member. And when they decided not to refer, there was no minority report from him. There was not even a vote against from him. It was a unanimous vote. So what he was trying to do, Mr. Speaker, was to blame you by his partial release of his letter, and he was leading the public to believe that somehow you made this decision against the wishes of the committee. The rules of this House do not allow me to assert whether I view the misleading of the public as deliberate. So the House can make its own judgment on that. But this miserable half apology was completely inadequate for the breach of this measure.
I'm going to leave it there for today, and I hope them will reconsider the way he's put his own part. Now, I come to the urgent question. I'm going to let members leave before...
Yeah, there you go. It's exactly a humdinger, but still like relevant for a couple of reasons. One, primarily, the disproportionate number of Scottish MPs that decided to make a statement today, all with trying to push.
We now come to the urgent question.
On the question of Scottish referendum and his unwillingness, it seems, to accept numerous Scottish votes in the Scottish House to level something to Parliament for a Scottish referendum, and Rishi Sunak's just ignoring it, and everyone's like, you can't ignore this, this is the will of the people. And he keeps going, no, you had your referendum and I'm going to abide by that. That's literally it. So it's, it's only a matter of time before Scottish referendum takes place. And then not only that,
of the Scottish Parliament to legislate for a referendum on independence. The UK Supreme Court has today determined that it is outside the powers of the Scottish Parliament to hold an independence referendum. And I respect the Court's clear and definitive ruling on this matter. The Scottish Government's Lord Advocate referred this question to the Supreme Court, which has today given its judgment. And, Mr. Speaker, the UK Government's position has always been clear that it would be outside the Scottish Parliament's competence to legislate for a referendum on Scottish independence because it is a matter wholly reserved to the United Kingdom Parliament. We welcome the Court's unanimous and unequivocal ruling, which supports the United Kingdom's Government's long-standing position on this matter. People want to see the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government focus on issues that matter to them, not on constitutional division. People across Scotland rightly want and expect to see both their governments and the United Kingdom and the Scottish Government working together with the relentless focus on the issues that matter to them, their families and their communities.
And who are you to say what those
The Prime Minister has been very clear and has demonstrated since day one that it is our duty to work constructively with the Scottish Government. We fully respect the devolution settlement and we want to work together with the Scottish Government on vital areas like tackling the cost of living, growing our economy and leading the international response to Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. At this time of unprecedented challenges, the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom have never been more apparent. Never been more apparent. Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom Government is providing the Scottish Government with a record block grant settlement of £41 billion per year over the next 3 years. And the people in Scotland are benefiting from unprecedented cost of living support announced by this Prime Minister and our Chancellor. It is important now that we move on from constitutional issues to focus on tackling our shared challenges.
It's just a constitutional
I therefore
issue.
welcome the Supreme Court judgment and I call on the Scottish Government to set aside these divisive constitutional issues so that we can work together, focusing all of our attention on and resources on the key issues that matter to the people of Scotland.
So condescending.
Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom Government is proud of its role as the custodian of the devolution settlement. The United Kingdom is one of the most successful political and economic unions in the world. By promoting and protecting its combined strengths, we are building on hundreds of years of partnership and shared history. And Mr. Speaker, I'd conclude by saying that when we work together as one United Kingdom, we are safer, stronger and more prosperous.
Ian Black.
Get him, Ian. Tear him apart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this urgent question.
All the
It is right that the UK Government answers questions today and answers
all the
them
Scots
quickly.
are there, all the Tories have gone.
Because this morning, the Supreme Court dealt with a question of law. There is now a massive question of democracy.
Hear, hear.
Some of the Westminster parties are already widely celebrating this morning's decision. But I think it's safe to say that their thoughtless triumphalism won't last very long. Because this judgment raises profound and deeply uncomfortable questions about the basis of the future of the United Kingdom. The biggest question of all is how the Prime Minister can ever again repeat the myth that the United Kingdom is a voluntary union of nations.
Clearly it is.
In 2014, the Smith Commission made it clear that, and I quote, "Nothing in its report prevented Scotland becoming an independent country should the people of Scotland so choose."
And they've chosen.
If that is true, if his government is still committed to that promise, will he urgently amend the Scotland Act to ensure that the Scottish people have the right to choose our own future? If he fails to do that, is he deliberately choosing to deny democracy? Because a so-called partnership in which one partner is denied the right to choose a different future, or even itself to ask the question,
it's not a partnership,
cannot be described in any way as a voluntary or even a partnership at all. Mr. Speaker, what today's decision does is cast focus on the democratic decisions of the Scottish people. Since 2014, the SNP has won 8 elections in a row. We have secured multiple mandates.
Yes, they have.
The question is, how many times do people in Scotland have to vote for a referendum before they get it?
Ooh.
The more contempt the Westminster establishment shows for Scottish democracy,
you'd rather Scotland
the more
stay part of Great Britain.
that Scotland will vote yes when the choice does come to be made.
Absolutely.
Because Scotland didn't vote for Brexit.
I'd rather
didn't
have
vote for a new age of Tory austerity. We didn't vote for this Prime Minister. But, and we haven't voted for the Tories in Scotland
some things
since
are out of your control.
1955.
With the rather.
What we did vote for was the choice of a different future. If Westminster keeps blocking our democratic decisions, lawfully and democratically, Scotland will find a way out of this union.
They'll find a way.
Mr. Speaker, I mean, I would raise a couple of points to the Honourable. This idea that there was a mandate delivered in 2021 in the holiday elections is completely misleading. the First Minister herself said in an interview in the Herald, that parties, and this is when she thought that the former First Minister, their leader, previous leader Alex Salmond, was gaming the system with his party ALBOP. She very clearly said that parties should stand on both the list and first past the post constituency system. And the Greens did not fulfil that, neither did ALBA. So let's be clear, in the 22 Holyrood elections, the so-called mandate, less than 1/3 of the Scottish electorate voted for the SNP.
Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland.
He's citing the dodgy
Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by thanking the Supreme Court for examining this case in detail, for reaching an unanimous decision and for doing so in a speedy manner. I also want to thank the Scottish Lord Advocate for referring this case to the Supreme Court. She was right not to allow it to be lodged in the Scottish Parliament before seeking legal clarity on this matter, and we are all in a better place now for that clarity having been put forward.
Who was telling me
the
that
Supreme Court
Labour and
is absolutely
Conservatives
clear
are working
concise.
together against the SNP in Scotland?
The leader of the SNP has just accused those who are against independence of triumphalism today. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are deeply disappointed and angry that our politics in Scotland is paralysed by this constitutional grievance. It's now time for all of us in Scottish politics to focus on the problems facing our country, from rocketing bills to the crisis in our NHS. And I wish they had such passion for doing that. I fear that won't happen after the First Minister has announced that she will turn the next general election into a de facto referendum. As an example, Madam Deputy Speaker, the SNP have made such a mess of our NHS that earlier this week, NHS chiefs have been discussing plans to privatise our health service. Labour, and perhaps our country's greatest
he'd
achievement.
be seen as a traitor.
There is not a majority in Scotland for a referendum or for independence, but neither is the majority for the status quo. There is a majority in Scotland and across the UK for change. This failing and incapable Tory government is unfit to govern this country. They've crashed the economy, and they are as big a threat to the Union than any nationalist. People in Scotland and across the UK are sick of watching their incompetence, our national standing falling in the world, and working people paying for their decisions. But change is coming. It's coming with a UK Labour government that will bring economic growth, raise living standards, and restore our nation's place in the world. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that change is indeed coming, and Scottish voters will lead the way by kicking his government out of office and helping to elect a UK Labour government?
Madam Deputy Speaker, no, I don't agree with him on his last point.
David Mandel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents, Madam Deputy Speaker, won't be celebrating this outcome, but they will be deeply relieved that they are not going to be facing a hugely divisive independence referendum next October with all the other issues that they face. In my constituency, people cannot access an NHS dentist. They cannot access a GP. They can hardly get an ambulance to come out, and our local hospital was overwhelmed 2 weeks ago. On that basis, does my right honourable friend agree with me that this is the time to move on and focus on the issues that really matter to our constituents in Scotland?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right, and I know he's put a lot of work in on this subject in the past. The Scottish Government must focus on the people's priorities. Public services in Scotland are falling behind and failing in many areas. And it is important that we now stop constitutional wrangling and focus on what the people's priorities are. That's what they want us to do.
She was there for PMQs. I thought it was going to be a dull one. I thought it was going to be a B-team PMQs.
Madam Deputy Speaker, democracy denial is not a good look. No. We've had repeated non-answers. We've had repeated assertions from the Tory benches today that they somehow know better than the people of Scotland what they want. And now we've had an extraordinary suggestion from the Secretary of State that we somehow don't have a mandate. None of these things are correct. None of these things deal with the crux of this issue, which is a fundamental issue of democracy and whether this really is a voluntary union. Is the Secretary of State going to stand up for democracy or not?
I do stand up for democracy. As I said, in the Holyrood elections last year, less than a third of Scots voted for the Scottish National Party, and in current polling shows that less than a third of Scots want another independence referendum.
Ian Stewart.
That's not true.
Madam Deputy Speaker,
like,
now that we
how
have
many
clarity from the Supreme Court, can I urge my right honourable friend
like John Cena
to
with
redouble his efforts to work
the Scottish
with
issue.
the Scottish Government and with local authorities in Scotland to deliver on the issues that matter to people. My experience as 2 years in the Scotland office is that there is that appetite to work together on welfare, where there's shared responsibility, on the city deals and many other issues. That's what we should be focusing on, not more divisive referendums.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. It's not just what's in front of us, but what's behind us. The furlough scheme, which supported 900,000 jobs during the pandemic.
The questions about Scotland, which come directly after PMQs, which was characterised by a disproportionate number of Scottish representatives asking questions during PMQs. Rishi Sunak's I'm starting to see I thought Rishi Sunak gave quite a robust performance as Tory leader, but after about 3/4 of the way through, you start to see what his tactic is, right? And his tactic is to eat up time with platitudes and then give a flim-flam answer. So if I was to ask Rishi Sunak a question, he'd say, well, it's absolutely, I'm glad that you asked me that question because blah, blah, blah. And you, having worked where you've been working several times, are very knowledgeable about the question that you're about to ask me. So I'm going to answer that question with all seriousness, knowing that you have worked in that department for a long time and you're actually quite a sensible person to ask me that question. Now, in answering that question, that's Rishi Sunak. Do you know what I mean? That's what you say. He's already eaten up half the time, and it's like it's fundamentally important. It's something we put 13 billion into, because it just shows our commitment towards that project. And these are the type of things that we've already been doing, which lets you know that we're on your side. I'm like, they're going, what? Like, that's Rishi Sunak. That's Rishi Sunak's tactics there. Basically, it's like Boris Johnson is a public school boy. Well, it's like a weak Boris Johnson, basically.
Distract attention from the failures of the Scottish Government on schools, on health, on procurement of ferries and on many, many other issues.
Scott's telling to shut.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and he only makes points that many of the commentariat make in the Scottish media.
Alistair Carmine.
Will the Secretary of State, however, give me an assurance that in demanding respect for the rule of law from others, the government of which he is part will do the same thing going forward?
Yes.
David Duckett.
You've got a Rasta man in there.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I do welcome the unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court today and respect that judgment, as I believe everyone else in the House have already said they share. Would my right honourable friend agree? He already has pointed out the current polling, the results of past elections not showing a majority of voters in Scotland favouring independence supporting parties. Does he agree that democratic mandate has not? There is no evidence that has changed since 2014.
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The majority of voters in Scotland vote for parties that support the Union.
Joanna Cherry.
Labour and the Tories there. Did you see?
The United Kingdom Supreme Court have answered a legal question this morning, not a political one. And the lesson of history is that a nation's exercise of its right to self-determination can be delayed but not denied. So, can the right honourable gentleman answer the question that the Prime Minister could not or would not answer? And it's this. If people living in Scotland continue to elect a majority of pro-independence MSPs and MPs who support a second independence referendum, what is the democratic route to realising that mandate?
Good question.
Well, as I've pointed out before, it is not the case that a majority of the Scottish electorate have voted for independent supporting parties.
Alan Cairns.
you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome today's the clarity that today's judgment has been provided by the Supreme Court.
How do my people get free? Your people don't want to be free. Yeah, but we want to be free, and we're talking about freedom, and we voted for freedom, but you don't want to be free. Yeah, but we do. Those people, well, according to these figures, you don't want to be free. That's pretty much what's been going on. Yes, we've looked at the data and the analysis, and only 1/3 of you even want to be free. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I mean, as a businessman before I came into this place, I agree with my honourable friend. It is unattractive to investors when there is uncertainty and a cloud hanging over Scotland on this matter. Far better the Scottish Government put it behind them now. The ruling is very clear, and we move forward to building the Scottish economy for the benefit of all the people in Scotland.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We sit here in this House knowing that Scottish politicians will only ever make up a fraction of the seats. We have a UK government that the people of Scotland didn't vote for, indeed a UK Prime Minister that nobody has voted for. So, bearing all that in mind, can I ask Westminster's man in Scotland to name just one scenario under which he would agree to the people of Scotland being able to determine their own democratic future?
Which is what we're talking about.
Well, as I've said in my answers before, the route to a referendum is when there's consensus between governments, across political parties and across Civic Scotland, as there was in 2014. That is not the case now. Now, the UK government wants to focus on the Scottish economy, on creating free ports, on supporting people in the cost of living and getting on with the day job, which is what I think the Scottish Government should do.
Richard Graham.
Madam Deputy Speaker,
so condescending,
as someone of Scottish descent, can I just say that there are many of us living in the United Kingdom across the 4 separate territories who have an enormous fondness and love for Scotland. And when I have been visiting Scotland, for example, to the European Marine Energy Centre in Orkney, which I noticed, by the way, that the leader of the SNP here in Westminster has never visited himself, or whether I'm visiting Nova outside Edinburgh or the Rosyth shipyards. This is to support great businesses based in Scotland doing exciting things which the United Kingdom can promote abroad for the benefit of all of us, and surely that is the most important thing that all of us today could focus on.
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and to his initial remarks, we are a family of nations and we are a nation of families.
Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm a bit
not by the looks of it.
Why does this government, which doesn't have a mandate in Scotland, continue to refuse the right for the Scottish people to hold a referendum as things have changed enormously since 2014?
Madam Deputy Speaker, because this government believes that the Scottish people's priorities are to see the two governments working together in a collaborative and constructive partnership.
That's the Minister for Scotland.
Jerome Mayhew.
Speaker, the SNP mistake their obsession with independence as the obsession of the people of Scotland. But we've already heard that's simply not the case. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that rather than going down this rabbit hole of creating a constitutional crisis, as we've heard, we should all of our constituents, north and south of the border, want us to focus on making our public services work? And that is an area where the SNP conspicuously failed.
I think Scotland would be
my honourable friend makes a very, very salient point, and he's absolutely right. The Scottish people want to see good public services delivered to them by the Scottish Government that is focused on the things that would devolve to Holyrood.
Ms Savile Roberts.
The Braverman vote in 1957 taught people in Wales that Welsh MPs can always be overridden by the structural tyranny of the majority here in Westminster. The First Minister of Wales, himself a unionist, is on record saying that the UK can only be sustained, and I quote, as a voluntary association of 4 nations in which we choose to pool our sovereignty for common purpose and for common benefits. Given that the Labour front bench has parroted the same lines as the Tories this afternoon,
yes, they have.
will he write to the First Minister of Wales to confirm whether we are voluntary partners in this union or involuntary inmates?
Yeah. Even the Welsh are asking.
No, I won't be writing to the First Minister of Wales. I'll leave that to the Secretary of State for Wales or anyone else who feels that that's in their remit. And I just say to the Honourable Lady, you know, polling shows that less than a third of Scots want another independence referendum.
You can't just say polling shows Scottish people still want to be...
And cloth-eared response by the Prime Minister, the so-called Secretary of State for Scotland, and the Tory benches to the democratic human rights of Scots being ripped away from them will be seen by many Scots today. Could you, Madam Deputy Speaker, could you imagine the uproar if the European Parliament, with European courts, had denied this Parliament the right to legislate on the Brexit referendum? Or simply unable to answer to the same question to the Chair of the Scottish Affairs Committee. So how does any member country of this so-called voluntary union leave?
How do we leave? It's voluntary union. How do we leave?
I don't know if he's, you know, I don't know if he's read the Supreme Court judgment, but it makes it very clear the matter is reserved to the Westminster Parliament, and it's very it is very clear that this mandate argument, less than a third of Scots voted for the SNP, of the electorate voted for the SNP last year. We're very clear about that, and we're very clear that a future referendum would be, as in 2014, when there's consensus, I am answering it, a consensus between both governments.
Yeah, 2014 was rigged.
Scotland.
So, the answer to Scottish independence lies in Westminster granting it, which is what he just said.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I asked the Secretary of State the same question that I asked the Prime Minister just a short while ago, which I'm still waiting on an answer to, which is what's the route for a nation to leave this so-called voluntary union? He's answered 3 times now about the majority of votes. So would they respect the result of a general election acting as a de facto referendum?
Madam Deputy Speaker, general elections are when people expect parties to come forward with a manifesto of the issues that face Scotland and face the United Kingdom. That's what general elections are for.
Colin Eastwood.
The former Member of Parliament for Cork City once said, "No man has the right to fix a boundary to the march of a nation. No man has the right to say to his country, thus far shalt thou go and no further." Of course, we don't have a member of this Parliament anymore for Cork City because Charles Stewart Parnell was right. This United Kingdom is clearly not a partnership of equals. That has been made absolutely clear today. So when will this government publish clear criteria for how the people of the north of Ireland can leave this United Kingdom?
Well, I suggest the honourable gentleman ask that question and Northern Ireland questions.
Drew Hendry.
Deputy Speaker, can the Secretary of State confirm that this, in his view, that this is a voluntary union? And if so, if the answer is yes, what is the mechanism in future for the Scottish people to be able to have their choice about whether they remain within it?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I feel I've answered that question many times already, so I'm just going to refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave earlier.
Deirdre Brock.
Deputy Speaker, things have changed dramatically since 2014, and I would remind the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland that in 2019 he said a democracy...
Oh, the events. Oh. Are you kidding me? It hasn't. You know it hasn't, right? You know it hasn't. That's just the Guardian coming to the end. I think Dickhead downstairs has started thumping music again.
This morning, the Supreme...
No, that's a replay. We don't want that. We want it live. Oh, Dickhead's doing stupid shit downstairs. I might turn the mic on so you can hear it. Oh no, the event's ended. Alright, well. Let's hear my neighbour then. Oh shit, what's going on there? One, two. Is it really sensitive? I think it's really sensitive. Good. Right, because I had dickhead downstairs. I think he could hear my voice, so he started thumping music. I just had to take all the filters off the mic. Isn't that weird? And then when I see I swear he's watching the stream. He must have my link and watch the stream. Yeah, I might have to go. Anyway, yeah, that's the end of PMQs and questions being asked in the House at the moment. That's, believe it or not, that was the Scottish minister. You know that posh English dude there. That's the Scottish minister. So, anyways, yeah, let me end it because I got a dickhead. I think every time I start speaking, he thumps the music up, right? So obviously, he's just been a dick. Oh yeah, and it's time. Anyway, look, there you go. PMQs ended. Rishi Sunak didn't do too badly, but after a while, you get to see kind of like his format. Do you know what I mean? It's very don't answer any questions, and then it eats up a majority of the time in the response. So like after about 2 or 3 PMQs, people start to get you know, the first 2 or 3, I think he pretty much had a honeymoon. Anyway, there you go. A little bit of politics. 66 Home Affairs Committee talked to Suella Braverman and PMQs. Now I'm going to go for watch Germany versus Japan and watch Japan get brushed because, well, that's going to happen, right? You know what I mean? Anyway, peace out. See you in a bit.
I feel good, because I know Catcher Freeman somewhere. The Catcher Freeman somewhere. You know Catcher Freeman, who sits on high and looks down low. Man cannot make it like this. They can take the picture, but they can't make it. Only the greatest black man who ever lived, that you have it on high, can make it for you. Catcher Freeman was the greatest black man who ever lived. Joy. Don't be ashamed to call Catcher Freeman was a sexy man. Yes, look. Only Catcher Freeman can give that woman the kind of joy she had right there. Make a joyful noise unto the greatest black man who ever lived. I am very happy to be here. Amen. Yes, sir. Can I get an amen? I don't know what you come to do, but I'm the praise. Malcolm X, Nat Turner, and Barack Obama all rolled into one. Lord.
You're Catcher Freeman? The Catcher Freeman?
You've heard of him.
Of course I've heard of you. Who has not heard of Catcher Freeman?